This is my final presentation for EPSY 328 Communications. My name is Jessica Buchanan and Carlin. Let's get started on my reflective Pecha Kucha. Sometimes when you are in a busy classroom, you think that quiet students are just shy or not participating. But because of what we have learned this semester, I realize that for some students, it's not about willingness, it is about access to communication in a way that works for them. In this presentation, I'm focusing on pragmatics, which is social communication, and augmentative and alternative communication, or AAC. These two areas are connected because they both shape how students express themselves, interact with others, and ultimately feel included or excluded within classroom environment. Before taking this course, I mostly thought about communication as something verbal, like speaking clearly or using the right words. I didn't really think about the social side of communication or how students who communicate differently might experience school in ways that aren't always visible to teachers. I wouldn't say I was ignorant to it, but before this course, I didn't fully process how diverse the population was of people who use AAC machines and the reasons why. One of the first things I learned is that pragmatics is much more complex than just talking. It involves understanding social rules, like taking turns in conversation, reading body language, and knowing what is appropriate to say in different situations, which can be really challenging for some students. Something that really challenged my thinking was realizing that what we sometimes label as problem behavior is for the most part a form of communication. For example, a student who interrupts or avoids group work might actually be struggling with social communication rather than intentionally misbehaving. One idea that really stood out to me from the readings is that pragmatic development looks different for every child. It can be influenced by personality, like whether a child is naturally more outgoing or reserved, but also by social and cultural context, which really changed how I think about communication differences. I realize that social communication challenges are often invisible or not obviously there at first. A student might be able to speak clearly and follow academic content, but still struggle to connect with peers or understand social expectations, which can impact their sense of belonging in the classroom. I have used an AAC machine before, but in this course I learned it includes a wide range of communication methods like visuals, gestures, communication boards, or speech generating devices. It's not just high-tech tools, but anything that supports a student in expressing their thoughts, needs, and ideas when speech alone isn't enough. Before this course, I assumed that AAC was mainly for students who couldn't speak at all, as my experience was with nonverbal students. But I learned that AAC can actually support language development and communication for many students, and it doesn't replace speech. It often helps build it, which shifted my perspective. What maybe stood out the most in this course was the idea of AAC bringing out students' identity and not just a tool for communication. When students are given ways to express themselves, they're able to share their personalities, preferences, and opinions, which is essential for building relationships and feeling included. One of my biggest aha moments was realizing that communication is directly connected to access. If a student can't communicate effectively, they may not be able to fully participate in learning, social interactions, or classroom routines, which can lead to exclusion even if they are physically present. So even if a student is overusing a button on their AAC machine, you never take the machine away. This made me rethink what inclusion really means. It's not just about having students in the same classroom, but about making sure they can actively participate. If we don't recognize different communication styles, especially those shaped by culture or personality, we may unintentionally exclude students. I also started to reflect on how my own assumptions could impact students. If I expect all students to communicate in the same way, I might misinterpret differences as deficits, instead of recognizing that communication styles are influenced by background, experience, and individual differences. One small but powerful strategy I learned about is wait time. Students who use AAC or who process language differently may need more time to respond. And if I rush them or move on too quickly, I'm actually limiting their opportunity to communicate and their ability to participate. Another shift in my thinking is understanding that communication is not just the student's responsibility. As a teacher, it's my role to create an environment where communication is supported, whether that means adapting how I speak, providing visuals, or modeling different ways to communicate. In my classroom, I will use supports like visual schedules, sentence starters, and modeling to make communication more accessible to every student, not just a few. These strategies don't just support students with identified needs, they benefit all learners by making expectations more clear. I also realized that we can't assume students will naturally pick up social communication skills. I will intentionally teach and model things like turn-taking, active listening, and how to join conversations while also creating structured opportunities for students to practice these skills. It's important to normalize AAC use in the classroom. If students see different ways of communicating as accepted and valued, it helps reduce stigma and creates a more inclusive environment where all students feel comfortable expressing themselves. That is the goal that we want in all of our classrooms. Now, when I think back to my original assumption about quiet students, I see it very differently. Instead of assuming they are disengaged, I would now consider what barriers might be affecting their communication and how I can better support them as their teacher. Overall, this course changed how I understand communication. It's not just about speaking, it's about connection, identity, and access. As a teacher, I want to make sure that every student has a way to be heard and included in the classroom. I also want to keep learning about communication and how best to help my future students succeed. And these are my wonderful references that I used for my Pecha Kucha. Thank you so much.